certainly I've been, again, slightly warned off. I mean, several people who've
Really?
investigated have
You've been
done.
warned off?
Well, yeah, the word is this is not something that should be looked at, and this is a murder, which of course has never been solved from 1943.
Hello and welcome to the Aspects of History podcast. Now that was Andrew Lownie who you heard at the top there, and he's talking about being warned off. Yes, warned off. I didn't think that such a thing actually happened. I'm so naive. But clearly in his investigation and in his book Traitor King, which is what we're talking about, all about the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, he's certainly ruffled some feathers. And so we talk a little bit about murder, conspiracy, explosive revelations, really. And then we move on a little bit and talk about Guy Burgess. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. Guy Burgess was one of the Cambridge spies who was spying for the Russians during the Cold War, and then he defected and lived out his days in a kind of alcoholic stupor, really. So it's rather a sad ending, but some would say a deserved ending. I personally, there's humanity in us all, and he did die very miserably. There is a very good, I recommend a very good TV play with Alan Bates, written by Alan Bennett, called A Gentleman Abroad. And it's absolutely brilliant, and it's based off a chance meeting between Guy Burgess when he had been in Russia for a few years by then, and he meets the Royal Shakespeare Company, who are on a tour to Moscow, and I don't think he is actually at the performance itself. He sort of barges in to one of the actresses' dressing rooms, and it's all about a sort of a 2-day period over where she meets him. So I really recommend it. I mean, it's Alan Bennett, so you can't go wrong with that. And one thing that stayed with me was he eats this tomato with cloves of raw garlic stuck in each of the little segments, which is a bit of a weird dish. But I ate some raw garlic last night, and I don't ask, but I'm still stinking of it today. But anyway, I completely digress. Now, so it's Christmas. We just had our Christmas party on Wednesday. We're about the only magazine or website or history-related anything that actually proceeded with our website. So it was a lot of fun, and I had a good time. There were lots of nice historians there, and so we did have a good time. I hope you guys are too. Got a few more days till the big day. So this is going to be the final part of 2021 before. So I'm shutting up shop and going to buy presents and things. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful Christmas. We've just released our magazine. If you're interested, it's got James Holland in it. It's got Dan Jones in it. It's got Tessa Dunlop and Margaret Macmillan. Now, if you're not familiar with Margaret Macmillan, you should be. She's brilliant. She actually gave the BBC Radio 4 Wreath lectures, and she's written a piece for us answering questions that she's often asked about war. What is it good for? So she has written a piece for us in the magazine, and I'm a big fan of Margaret Macmillan. I do recommend you have a look into some of her works. So anyway, I'm motoring on now. We should be getting on with the podcast. So I hope you enjoy it. We talk about lots of things, as I said. I'll put show notes for the stuff we mentioned throughout in the episode, and so that you can look into things further if you're interested. And so without much further ado, I'll hand you over to me and Andrew. Now, it's. I was thinking about a bit of a counterfactual, which I know many historians hate. So please indulge me for a moment. But if he had been executed, and I know it's a big if because there'd be a lot of people who wouldn't think that was particularly useful. I just wonder what impact that would have been on the monarchy and how the monarchy would have recovered from such a that would have been
Well,
massive.
I don't think they could have done that, but there was a man called Peter Russell who was later a professor of Spanish at Oxford University, and Peter Russell was sent to Lisbon in that summer of 1940 with an eye to keep, with a mission to keep an eye on him, and told to shoot him if required. So I think they were prepared to stage some sort of killing to sort him out if required. Unfortunately, Peter Russell is dead and has never spoke only in very vague terms to his biographer. But so that would be very interesting to find out more about that. But I think there was a solution. But counterfactual history I think is very interesting, and there's a section at the end of the book where I look at all the fiction connected with the Duke. And the vast majority of it is actually around this question of what would have happened either if he'd become king in 1936, or indeed he'd been brought back as a Pétain figure with Lloyd George as prime minister in 1940. So this is, like Len Deighton's SSGB, and it is fascinating to think about it. And of course, the fascinating thing also is that if he had reigned, the Queen would not have come to power until 1972 when he died. So we would have had a very, very different story. I suspect, Jews would have been sent to extermination camps. We would have had Oswald Mosley being given a prominent role. He remained friendly with Mosley to the end of his life. Our history would have been very, very different.
It almost doesn't bear thinking about. It's so frightening. I mean, if and I really like what you did with listing all those fiction books. One I read, Any Human Heart by William Boyd.
Which, wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, it really
very
is.
Clever.
Yeah,
I've
so
talked
readers should
about it because, of course, what we haven't talked about is the Harry Oakes murder in the Bahamas, which
exactly,
he was deeply involved. And Will talks about this in the book, and it's still a huge thing in the Bahamas. I mean, he said he was asked to leave a cocktail party when he raised the question. And certainly I've been, again, slightly warned off. I mean, several people
really
have died.
Warned off.
Well, yeah, the word is this is not something that should be looked at. And this is a murder, which of course has never been solved, from 1943. The background, as you know, is that a very close friend of the Duke, Harry Oakes, who's probably the richest person on the Bahamas, was found murdered in his bed one morning. The first person to be told was the Duke, who strangely ordered a news blackout. And instead of getting in Scotland Yard or the FBI from New York or even the RAF police, he brought in two crooked FBI agents from Miami to investigate this, who planted evidence on Harry Oakes' son-in-law to try and frame him for the crime, having been since put up to this by the Duke. And he was almost responsible for sending an innocent man to the gallows. And it looks like the Duke was involved in some shady financial dealings, involved with Oakes and the man who I think everyone thinks ordered the hitmen to kill Harry Oakes, a man called Harold Christie, who was a prominent businessman and later knighted. But that story has never fully come out. Again, the papers have been destroyed. People won't talk. And most people who know about the case, of course, are now dead. But I do have, as you know, a whole chapter on it and about the mysterious deaths of people involved in investigating it and the way that the cases, the attempts to open up the case have always been closed. The Duke closed one at the end of the war. And no one really has been allowed to reinvestigate it, but it was a very sloppy investigation, and it's clear that there is more to it than meets the eye.
And his time in the Bahamas, he kind of gave up as well, didn't he? I assume the Oakes murder was a factor in that, but he didn't stick out his tenants.
No, he served more or less to the end of the war, but he didn't really get involved. Wallace was much better. She got involved with the canteen at the RAF base and worked there. She was involved with the Red Cross. She tried to make the best of what they called Elba, their exile. But he was bored. He really had no power. It was run by a group of local businessmen called the Bay Street Boys. He was drinking very heavily. I mean, he would, for example, the stories of him just going to strip shows. He played a lot of golf, and he was involved in these shady financial dealings. He was trying to get money out of the Bahamas and invested in property in Mexico through this Nazi owned bank. So he again, all this stuff is close. He was intriguing against to trying to stop America coming into the war until they did so in December 41. So people would come back. We know from the postal censorship reports of him talking to people at dinners about his pro-German views. He was very close to a man called Axel Wenner-Gren, who was a Swedish industrialist known as Goering's pal, who was a big landowner on the island. But again, British and American intelligence were deeply suspicious of him. They thought that the deep harbors that he was building at this property in the Bahamas was to service U-boats cruising in the Caribbean. The Duke was repeatedly warned by both the British and the Americans, and we have those reports, not to get involved with Axel Gren, who was put on the blacklist. But he continued to socialize with him and indeed to work with him financially. He didn't care.
Yeah, that's what I feel reading throughout the book. He just didn't seem to care, did he? He's almost like a sociopath, isn't he?
Yeah, he was such a narcissist. He was very open and very stupid, and he knew he would be protected. He was a consummate liar, and he knew that people would have his back. And he was so greedy for making money that he wasn't cautious about the way he operated. He had this contempt for the civil servants and advisors around him. He ignored their advice, again, shades of some of the current members of the royal family. And it's only now, as you say, 50 years after his death and 80 years after these events, that the story is beginning to emerge.
Now, the relationship between the Duke and the Duchess is also very odd. Now, when I was younger, and innocent and stupid, I assumed that they were in love and he had given it all up for love. But that's not the case either, is it?
No, I don't think you were stupid, because I mean that was the line that was pumped out and is still believed, particularly in the States. It's a great romantic story. Madonna's done films on it. But the reality was that these were two people trapped in a marriage that certainly one of them didn't want. Wallace was emotionally blackmailed into marrying him when he threatened to kill himself in 1936. I mean, even before they got married, she was confiding to people like Diana Cooper on the Nail-In cruise in October 36 that she found him extremely boring and didn't want to be, spend time alone in his company. But she was sort of, she enjoyed being the king's mistress. He was lavishing attention, jewels on her. He was meeting interesting people, but she never expected to have to marry him. And so, in a sense, events overtook them. He was obsessed with her. He had this mother fixation. He liked dominant women. The more awful she was, the more he liked it. I mean, often he went to bed in tears. She would tell him to buzz off mosquito. People were appalled by the way she treated him. But the worse she treated him, and she treated lots of people like that, including servants and retail staff, people, shopkeepers and people, the more he liked it. And she was bored in this marriage. She began to have affairs, including a long-standing one with a man called Jimmy Donahue, who was actually bisexual. People quipped that he'd given up a king for a queen. But the great advantage of Jimmy Donahue was that he was rich and picked up a lot of their bills. And there's some suggestion from people like Scotty Bowers, who was a sort of actor in Hollywood who procured, pimped for the stars, that they actually took advantage of his services and were both bisexual. And there's quite a lot of evidence from people from Chips Channon and Robert Bruce Lockhart's diaries through to contemporary people like Nicky Haslam, who knew the gay world at the time and knew Wallace, that they were actually bisexual, both of them. So it wasn't a love affair. He tried to buy her love with jewels, and they were sort of stuck together, and they were sort of restless. They were constantly traveling, constantly staying with people, constantly entertaining to hide the emptiness of their lives.
And that's what comes across. It's just the sheer emptiness. It seemed to be there after the Bahamas, they didn't really have anything to do, and so their job was to sort of design dinner plans and make sure they had the right guest list and things like that.
Exactly, exactly. And I think in some ways that could be argued as one of the mistakes. Churchill thought that he needed to be given something to do, but the royal family were very against it. I mean, they were aware of the treachery. In fact, George VI was briefed about it, just as literally came off the celebrations for VE Day. And, you know, there was a great deal of animosity. Wallace called the Queen Mum the witch from Glance. The Queen Mum called her that woman. You know, they felt very strongly that they'd broken he'd broken his oath that he had taken, you know, as king, to be king, that he'd caused a great deal of upset in the family. He'd behaved very badly with the financial settlement. He'd been a traitor to the country. And they really didn't want him to be given any role whatsoever. And there was this worry that he would use it for his own private gain. I mean, one again thinks of roles given to Prince Andrew and how he exploited those. And that he would be an embarrassment. And so what they wanted was him to go to the States or to France, where he was given tax exile status, and just basically keep quiet. And in fact, you know, when they came to Britain, Wallace was never really welcome in Britain, but when he came back, he never stayed at Buckingham Palace. He always had to stay at Claridge's. And it was only in the late 1960s that the royal family realized that this wasn't playing well in terms of public opinion. And that they were brought back for some unveiling of Queen Mary's plaque in 1967. And then, you know, they began to send flowers and there were quiet private visits. But even then, Prince Charles, when he popped in to see them once, when he was in Paris, was appalled at their behavior and the people that they mixed with. I mean, one of their close friends was a man called Clint Murchison, who's now been implicated in JF Kennedy's assassination. These were not people that they should be, you know, that if this had emerged and he'd had some public role and they were friends with these people, this would not have looked good. So, you know, they gardened, played golf, entertained, as you say, and looked at their stocks and shares, and that was it. You know, they could have done something for charity. There could have been all sorts of organizations that they could have used their influence to support and help. I mean, they did very, very little for charity.
And for the current, you've mentioned current members of the royal family. Did the Queen have any kind of relationship with her uncle, or it was because she was obviously very young when he abdicated?
Yeah, I mean, supposedly he was her favorite uncle, and there are lots of pictures of her with him. I mean, she was only 10 when the abdication happened. And clearly she was torn because her mother, she knew that her mother hated the Windsors. Her father had actually been quite close, you know, Bertie and it's a bit like Harry and William now. Bertie and David had been quite close as brothers. But I think, you know, she was always, public duty came first ahead of the family.
Yeah.
But it was only really with advice in the 1960s that she began to sort of put out overtures. I mean, what actually struck me, I only got into the Royal Archives after the book came out because they'd been closed during COVID. But actually what's appeared from the stuff I've seen there is actually the family felt even more angry and bitter about the abdication and about him than I think has actually come out publicly. So it was a much, much more bitter family feud than the books have even suggested to this point.
That's interesting. Are you going to put that in a new edition or paperback one?
Yes, I'd like to try and update. The paperback comes out in May for the 50th anniversary of the Duke's death and to tie in with the Channel 4 documentary. So we are finding new things, and I will try and add stuff if I can to update the paperback. But I'm certainly keeping the files open. I mean, it's a long process. You're only allowed into the Royal Archives for one day a month at the moment. And there are, I know, 40 different boxes of material which are available to researchers. This is apart from whatever is closed. So I am finding little nuggets of material there, which I'd like to add.
And do you think the COVID situation has been used as an excuse in your battle to get more of the archives, or is it?
Yes, absolutely. It's been used, for example, to delay freedom of information requests. People couldn't go in and look at records. So, for example, requests I made particularly to the Metropolitan Police to look at these special branch reports, which I'm now told have been destroyed, but their line is haven't actually even been catalogued yet. But that's, those things that should be dealt with in 24 days have now taken 6 to 8 months. I'm still waiting for requests made 2 years ago. So yes, that has been used. And they've actually even said that because the staff have been working from home and have been able to go in, that these are vexatious requests and they're not required to even answer them. So yes, they have used COVID as an excuse not to be open and transparent. The irony is, in the States, it's made research a lot easier. That a lot of material has been digitalized and is available either for payment or some of it for free. So that was how I was able to get a lot of this information from places like the Bahamas and from the States. They just literally stuck it in a PDF and emailed it to me. The Churchill College archives were brilliant. They actually gave me online access to their archive, which saved numerous trips to Cambridge and allowed me to spend a lot of time looking even at draft emails or draft telegrams as opposed to the published telegrams. So I was able to get behind the story of not necessarily what everyone wanted to be known, but actually what was really happening. So COVID had good and bad sides to it. The American National Archives have only just opened. I'm about to go and look at their files. And there are some files of the previous biographers with interviews from people who, for example, knew or worked with the Windsors, which I'm hoping also to go and look at, which were used by previous biographers, but I suspect some stuff was not used because of sensitivities with people still alive. So I'm hoping for fresh disclosures in any update.
Well,
need an article for aspects of history.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it must feel like wading through treacle. It really must. But
it's hard because I've done books previously on unsympathetic characters. I liked flawed heroes, so I did a book on the Guy Burgess members of
I gave that to my father, and he really liked it. But he did say, "What an awful man."
Well, people fall into two camps. Most people say, "What an awful man," and he was an awful man. Some people, generally, so we say less establishment people. I mean,
Yeah, my father's definitely establishment. He's definitely establishment.
People who are civil servants and all those people, army people like that, would that awful. But other people found him rather charismatic and an interesting character and a rather sad figure because, of course, he gave up a career to basically go into exile in Russia. And the Mountbattens, of course, again, were flawed. They had their difficult private lives, but again, a terrific sense of public service. And I think the theme of all these books is a sense of hidden or secret lives, or dual lives, that there's a public picture which is presented and actually often supported by history and the government, and then the cover-up and the real story behind the scenes and this secret life. And that's always been, I think, the theme of the last three biographies, and I hope I'll try and find a similar figure for the next book.
I did want to ask you, because you've mentioned Burgess, I'm going to just ask another question because I find him fascinating. But have you seen that film, Another Country?
Very much based on Burgess. Yeah, absolutely, based on Burgess. And what's very interesting is the author, Julian Mitchell, I think knew something about the story from, again, gay circles. As you know, one of the themes of the book is about him having to carry the can unfairly, partly for his homosexuality, but partly he's wrongly punished for something. And I think there's probably some truth there. And there's what's fascinating, again, and I have a section in the book on the literature. I'm always fascinated by, in a sense, the literature and the myths and the stories that emerge about people, how particularly creative people, playwrights and novelists, look at these characters. And I think one of the best books, for example, about Blunt is John Banfield's book, the novel. Often those books have more insight and are truer than the biographies can be. But the great advantage I had with the Burgess book was I started researching the book in 1984 when Burgess would only been 73. So a lot of his contemporaries were alive. I interviewed them. And then I had the benefit of a lot of files being released in 2015 when the book came out, which were, for example, the investigations by the Foreign Office Security Department. So I was able to marry the two and give what people have very sweetly said is probably a definitive account, because we were unlikely to get many more disclosures, or to have anyone else who will be able to talk about it. And that's what I try and do. I try and be as definitive in the books as I can by concentrating on the primary research.
Well, I think you've certainly achieved it with Traitor King. I can't see what else can be added in. So, well, we might have more for the paperback, but it as you say, I think what you've done here is, as I say, my jaw was on the floor, so it's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much.
The Burgess book.
I'll do a piece for you, on the new material.
Great, that would be fantastic. And then the Burgess book is Stalin's Englishman, but I'll put notes on this for our listeners so they can have a look at that as well. Okay, so I guess you're working on this sort of legal battle, and don't have much time to write a new book. But have you got any ideas of what you want to do next?
Well, I'm looking, for example, at the death of T.E. Lawrence, which has always been suggested.
Motorbike crash.
Yes, but the motorbike was covered with paint from a black car, a mysterious black car. And we know from some of the eyewitnesses, many of whom were soldiers, and from the boys who were riding ahead of him, that there was a black car there. And again, it's a big cover-up. Everything, there was a news blackout. So I don't think we've got the true story of T. Lawrence's death. So that's a strong contender. But whether one will ever get access to the archives, clearly all the people involved are now dead. That's the struggle. And sometimes one does a bit of work and then finds that one can't, only gets so far, and one can't actually, there isn't enough for a full book.
Well, it sounds juicy, but good luck with finding some nuggets in there. And I think that just leaves us to thank you very much for coming on and talking about the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. It's been really interesting, and best of luck with the ongoing battles with the government.
Well, that's very kind. I mean, I'm doing a crowdfunding at the moment on Crowd Justice to try and raise money, because I've run out of money. So if there are historians who feel this is an important issue, or people who believe in academic freedom of speech, I'd be very grateful. I've got to raise 42,000 by Christmas. So
I will put a link in the show notes.
That'd be very kind. Thank you very much. Anyway, it's been a pleasure, and I love the magazine, and I'd love to do a piece for it maybe next year.
Oh, Andrew, thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I certainly did. And I'm glad that we chatted a little bit about Burgess and some of the other things that Andrew's been working on. So I've actually put notes of everything that we talked about that is something that you can look into further. So at the beginning I talked about the Alan Bennett play, so I'll put that in. And then there's, of course, the two novels that Andrew... In fact, three novels. John Banville's novel, there's the Any Human Heart by William Boyd, and SSGB by Len Dayton. And then there is the film Another Country, which stars Rupert Everett and Colin Firth. They're both very young, and I really recommend that too. And the book that Andrew has written was Stalin's Englishman, and so I'll put that into. Plus his crowdfunding campaign, which is an important principle. Right, well now I'm going to go off and cook the ham, stuff the turkey, wrap the presents, and so I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas and New Year. I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening, for tolerating me, and I will be returning in January, so I hope you can I'm sure you can wait till then, but I will be back in January with more great guests talking about more fantastic history. And if you want to get hold of me at any point, you can. I'm on the Twitter at OllieWCQ, that's at OLLIEWCQ. There is the Aspects of History Twitter, that's at Aspects History. There's always great stuff coming out on that, loads of free articles and stuff like that. So if you're sitting on the sofa having digested a huge Christmas meal and you want to just have a look through some articles, just head over to our website. And then there is Andrew Lownie's Twitter, that's at Andrew Lownie, and that's Lownie spelled Lownie, and you can also follow us on the Instagram. But anyway, I'm going to sign off now. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you or speak to you in January. Thank you and good night.